Hey, Michael's here. Hey, Michael. Great. All right, super. So let's talk about this breakout room. So in the breakout room, we are assuming that stories and estimations are already done. Now, who's responsible for coming up with stories?
The team.
The team.
Team, right? Has ownership of the backlog, but should leverage the rest of the team. We've only got 3 hours in real life in this team breakout. If you leave it up to just the product owner to come up with all the stories, 3 hours are not enough, right? So we should leverage the full team. The team comes up with the stories. Who's estimating?
Sorry, Meena, but we had this yesterday, this wheel of different responsibility.
Yes.
And in that, it was product owner who was the responsible for the user stories. So has that changed, or is it?
Yes, that hasn't changed. Product owner is still responsible for it, but we are saying product owner should leverage the rest of the team, because if the product owner is the only one writing stories, those 3 hours may not be enough to do everything that we are intending over these 3 hours in this team breakout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the question asks who is responsible, then it's the product owner.
Okay.
But if the question asks who has the ownership of the team backlog, who manages the team backlog, that's the product owner. Right? But who participates in the team breakout? It's going to be the team. Who participates in PI planning? That's going to be the team. Okay. All right. So everybody on the team would have contributed to coming up with these stories, and only the team members will be estimating stories. Now, another caveat here, that estimating poker exercise, this team breakout is not the right time to do that. We come up, this is what we call high level estimates, right? So we can simply throw in some numbers using your own judgment, but we will have an opportunity to take these stories into backlog refinement, iteration planning. That's where you want to play that estimating poker to have a better assessment on these sizes. Does that make sense? Right? Because you might have 50 stories that you have on your plate. And if you start playing estimating poker, if you spend 5 minutes on each story, again, 3 hours are not enough for that. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. Now, most of my clients, when we run PI planning sessions like this, we end up breaking this 3-hour session into two 2-hour sessions on day 1, and then maybe 2 2-hour sessions on day 2. Okay. We have noticed that team breakouts need a little bit more time. So 2 hours, and then we go for a quick break and then another couple of hours. So 4 hours seems to be it, but SAFe recommends about 3 hours, and you can tweak it as you need. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay.
Could I ask a quick question?
Go for it, Michael.
Thanks. At this point, acceptance criteria has not been written?
No.
Okay.
No. So all of that is going to be done before you go head into your next backlog refinement iteration planning.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So assuming stories and estimates are already done, there's 3 things we need to do in our team breakout. Number 1, we want to load our stories into our iteration. Okay, what does that mean? This means you're going to simply click, drag them into your iteration. But caveat here, if you notice you have an enabler, okay, you want to look at those enablers and see if you want to prioritize them. So in this case, it's research how to enhance UX. Do you think this is something we want to prioritize? Would it impact other stories, or can it impact other stories? What do we think? Yay, nay?
Yes.
Okay. Possible, right? So that's a judgment call we need to make. So if we think user experience needs to be prioritized, we want to load that first and then continue loading the rest of the stories. Now, another question here. Should we load stories into our second iteration before the first iteration is complete? Yay, nay? Nay.
No.
Right? Another question here. Should we take stories from our second priority feature before all the stories from our first priority feature have been loaded? Yay or nay? No. Right? Because essentially feature 2 is not going to be marked complete until all stories have been planned for. Make sense? Yeah, right. So everything needs to be loaded before we start taking the rest of these stories in. Make sense? Yep. Okay. So you want to load your stories, calculate your load. Now, another question here. If your capacity is 32, what's a good number for your load?
30.
Can this load be above your capacity? Can this be over your capacity? Okay, so it's a good idea to leave some buffer space. Okay, and what kind of buffer space you want to leave? That's going to be dependent on the team. Okay, for example, if it's a new team, there's lots of uncertainties. We know in your backlog refinement and planning, stories are going to get split. We're going to re-estimate, the sizes might increase, right? So you want to make room for all of those changes. It's a good idea to leave some buffer space. Now, maybe 10%, 20%, 30% buffer space is good. More mature teams, I've seen 5 to 10% buffer space. For newer teams, I've seen even up to 30% buffer space. Okay, so if you've got 32, maybe something like 26, 27, 28 might be a good number for you. Make sense? Yeah. Okay.
And I just qualify, I think Hamid was saying the 70%, which if I remember correctly, nope, never mind. I take it back.
Okay, all right. Now here we also want to look at the capacity allocation. So user stories, enabler stories, maintenance effort, right? So enablers are mixed in here. For maintenance, if you have any maintenance work, also reserve time capacity for that. Okay, so in this case, assuming, let's say 10% for maintenance, 20% for as a buffer space, we are left with about 70% load. Does that make sense? Right, so see what works for you, figure it out in your own team. Okay, but make sure the load is below this capacity. Michael, question, comment?
Thank you very much. I was wondering, so the current tickets mention a size. Is that the size that the authors assign to it? And we're coming up.
These sizes?
Yeah.
Yes,
As a teacher size?
we are assuming that these stories and estimates have already been deen by the
Thank you.
so
Thank
team
you.
members would have estimated.
Thank you.
All right, great. So step one, loading your stories. Now this is pretty easy, pretty straightforward. This should not take too much time. PI objectives will take a longer time. Okay, what are PI objectives? Now, only the stories that have been loaded in these 2 iterations, we want to summarize them as high-level sentences. Okay, for example, enhancing UX, user experience, accessing shopping cart from any page, number of items from any page. Perhaps we can combine these as something like we can view and access shopping cart from any page. Okay, so we are simply summarizing it, writing it in plain English. We can change the number of items, we can remove items. So perhaps this is about editing and updating. So we can say, we can update cart. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, now here we are writing it in just plain English. In real life, it is also recommended that we add a business value there. What will updating cart enable? Okay, how will this encourage our users? Now, for the purpose of this simulation, it's okay to keep it straightforward like this. Now, who is responsible for identifying PI objectives?
Program product manager.
Some
Objectives, a team.
The team, right? So everybody on the team should be contributing. Please don't leave it up to just your Scrum Master or just your product owner to write those up. Okay, divide and conquer here. Collectively group them together, but then everybody should contribute to PI objectives. Okay, now step number 3, identifying risks. Maybe you can divide and conquer. Half of the group is identifying objectives, half of us identify risks. Okay, see what works for you. Now, what is a risk? Risk is anything that can derail your plan. Okay, for example, a risk could be something like we have a dependency on team safest for item X. A risk could be lack of skills to show updated number of items in the cart from any page. Okay, so we don't know how to do this yet, or we are new to the tool, right? So anything that can derail your plan would be a risk. Make sense? Yep. Okay, good. Now, once you've also identified your objectives, have a look at those and see if you want to call out anything as uncommitted. Okay, is there anything you don't want to guarantee? Okay, that would be your uncommitted. Make sense? Yep. Okay, questions on this exercise, and let me move these back. Questions on this exercise, on the team breakout.
One small one. I apologize. The business value.
Oh, we want to ignore that column.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
All right, ignore BV for now, which stands for business value.
And the team objective would be for both iterations?
Yes, so these objectives are for your PI. So whatever you're loading in your PI would be summarized as a. Good. All right, now in your breakout room, product owner, Dean, so assume Dean has already done most of the work. He has led the team in understanding the features, helping the team break them into stories, helping the team roughly prioritize them. They do not need to be in the exact priority sequence because this is not your iteration plan. This is your PI plan. Stories can move around. If you're planning to do it in the first iteration, it may not be done in the first iteration. Maybe it moves to third or second or fourth. Okay, so it can be reprioritized. It's a rough sequence. Okay, so product owners, if somebody has any question about stories and clarifying that, so please provide that clarity. Scrum Masters, both the teams can potentially share your screen, help guide the discussion, facilitate that discussion, manage the time box. So for example, how much time do we need in this breakout for those three things? Loading, summarizing as objectives, identifying risks.
20 minutes. I don't.
I was gonna say 15 to 20 minutes.
Right? If we start with something like 15 minutes, maybe time box it, say something like, hey, 5 minutes, we should be done with loading stories and we should spend 10 minutes and divide and conquer, identifying objectives, identifying risks. Does that make sense? Yep. Make sure to manage those time boxes, facilitate, share your screen, guide the discussion, share what's going on. Right, Adam, question?
Yeah, just a quick question. So before we load user stories from, let's say, the second priority feature, should we do completely all the stories from the priority feature, or could we, let's say, if we have capacity, have a small one from the, let's say?
Oh yes, for sure. If you are done loading all the stories from your first priority feature,
No. Actually, the question is, if we have, let's say, a big one for feature, let's say,
I see. Okay.
could we
All right.
use the capacity of having something smaller from the second
Sure.
priority feature? Okay.
Sure. So essentially, the stories from your second priority feature are just below the stories from your first priority feature. And let's say in your first priority feature, we've got this 8-pointer, there's a 3-pointer, there's another 8-pointer. Let's say we are done loading the 3 points, but then the next one is an 8-pointer, but we don't have capacity for 8 points. We can only take a 3. So we can take that next 3-point.
Okay, good.
Okay, so you can use your own judgment, but essentially you want to understand that this feature will only be marked complete when all of these stories are done and planned for.
Good, thanks.
Good. Okay, great. Other questions here? No? Okay, good to go in our team breakout. Yeah, okay, you're gonna see a little bit more of me this time to help guide you. So don't be surprised if you see me popping in and out. Everybody good with 15? Yeah, okay, 15 minutes. Your rooms are opening now. Good luck.
Hello.
Hey.
All right. I can drag these first priorities over to the first iteration.
Yes.
So let me make these. Why is it not letting me highlight?
Because all you just have to click on the box and then you can drag it.
Yeah. I am trying to do that and it's it's not. Yeah, when I do that, I was trying to create a drawing box. Let's see if I zoom in more if it works. No. Okay, so
What do we
apparently I
wanna
can't move
do
the
is-
boxes.
So what do we want to do as far as our load? I think that that's probably the first thing for us to figure out.
We're right. I was thinking 26 because we're down a person.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And then for our first iteration, it's all about shopping cart.
Yeah. Um,
Because the last one's going to be the most difficult, which is the shipping quote directly from the cart.
okay. Since I'm unable to apparently drag boxes, if you guys want to,
So first one,
let's just
change the number of items in the cart. That way you can update cart. That one seems pretty straightforward.
what about the user experience part, the spike?
For the technical spike, so first thing is research Ajax. Second one, change the number of items in the shopping cart.
Um,
I think this first one, I think being able to access your shopping cart is really important.
And
being
the
able to
next,
remove items too.
the other one too. Yeah, that was the next one that I was like, yes, because that's something where even just thinking about it remotely, it's just whenever you're on Amazon and you're within your cart, wouldn't it suck if like you clicked on an item, then all of a sudden you wanted to remove it, but you couldn't?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Um,
for me, and this is just the way that I'm thinking of it, is indicating the number of items from the shopping cart. That way you can just be able to be sure it's like, okay, you have already 2 or 3 things in the cart, and that can be displayed from each page.
or that you didn't select the same thing multiple times.
Right. The other one that I was thinking of too is for the shipping quote being more towards the end, because then you would have it set to where from any page you can have it always quote based on what's already in the cart. But if we need to make that higher priority, then we can also do that as well.
By the way, do we need to have both of these iterations loaded up?
Yeah, we
Mm,
needed.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we
So
load the second iteration probably with the next feature, depending on what we
right.
can get done in this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're already at 10 minutes, so we need to get going fast on this. We should already be done.
So we'll
Unfortunately.
do this one and this one, and then the last
Okay.
one will be for here. Okay. And then for this one, we have the spike as the first one. Then we have infrastructure. And same thing for this load, it's just going to be 26. I would say for the shipping, that's the first one because then it prevents any form of miscommunication between the checkout and from the shipping service. So upgrade Eclipse so that we can take advantage of the enhanced stability. Isn't that or its stability? Wasn't that a part of the presentation earlier?
It was. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think
for the system architect. So don't forget upgrade Eclipse to latest versions for stability. So would that mean it have to go into iteration 1? Okay. So okay, I'll move these down, but I think that would be enough for iteration 1.
Yeah, iteration 1, we're actually over by 2 points.
So the third one?
The removing your shopping cart, yeah.
If that's the case, what we'd have to do then is we also have to do these two as well. So for the functional spike, and then research Ajax. Yeah. So we're at 16. Access my shopping cart.
18.
I can see the price. It's 21.
So
I can change the number of car. Mainly what I'm trying to do is so yeah, we need to do something for this 8. So we're still off by 1, so we have to get rid of this one. So now we're at 26. So we have 1, 2, 8. So iteration 1, we're going to be doing for this one and this one. This one's from that.
I can start working on some of the risks.
Okay. So we have 2, 1, 8, 16. So really all we can pull from is 10 for this one. So it would have to be this 8 pointer and this 2 pointer. And roughly we're still left with 6 for our priority 4. Would we just want to cut the corner and say that our load is actually 29? Just so that way we can add 3 and 3? Okay. So now we can move this and this. So,
While we've been going through these, has anyone identified any risks?
I said one thing like changes to shipping charges by carriers could happen without notice.
Okay.
So here's real world application for it. I'm with the shipping provider, and a lot of times there are a lot of unexpected charges, such as if the user inputs incorrect dimensions or incorrect weight, the carrier is at their discretion to add adjustments. So it would be based off of if the user error regarding for if any of the information is incorrect from like a third party service, they would then be adjusted because the carrier is not going to complete the shipment without that kind of money. So the risk would be that if the carrier doesn't have full discretion or there's not any notification of please note, please ensure all the verifications correct, then the user could be liable for upcharges as well.
Okay. So
So-
will that still fall under without notice? Then because those could change without the carrier having let them know previously, because they wouldn't know that until after something's actually in the process of being shipped.
So for the one example we use is the difference between residential versus commercial shipping. So if you're doing commercial shipping, it's always going to be significantly cheaper just because it's going to be within larger vehicles that are already going to be pushing that. Residential, they're going to be using the smaller trucks, which is going to be using more. And if they have to add more to the load, then it may add more possibility for more of uncertainties happening for delivery times.
Okay.
So maybe we could also include something along the lines for like delivery accuracies instead of dates. Or
Hey team, quick question here. Seems like we are done with our load and we've taken 29 in each. Are we good with 29? So just 3 points buffer.
We were thinking about it in the
We did-
real world application because we only have 2 team members. Would we
Okay.
still be thinking about it as if we did have a third?
Yeah, so here we are assuming we've got 4 team members, person X, person Y.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
but that's okay. If the team feels confident with 29, that's okay. Now, I did notice we have some PI objectives. Did we end up grouping these stories for PI objectives? Okay, for some. Okay, so we see there's one enabler for Eclipse. This is for shipping costs. This one is for enhancing UX. Maybe it'll help if I share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is about UX. Maybe accessing shopping cart can be about your UX. Maybe viewing an icon with the number of items in the cart can also be about this UX. So those can be combined. Shipping code from your cart, delivery date, speed, shipping options, shipping preferences seems independent. Seeing the price of each shipping, that seems to be related to that shipping cost. Saving an item seems independent. Changing items, removing items seems to be combined. Does everybody see what we did?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Yes.
we should see one objective for Eclipse, another one for the shipping costs, another one for your icons, another one for saving, another one for changing the items in your cart, another one for shipping options, another one for defining preferences. Right? So we need to have 7 objectives, and I see we've got, this is number 3. Updating cart, this is number 5. Estimating costs, this is number 2. I think these might be duplicate. Delivery accuracy. Which one
Yeah.
is it tied to? Which one is it linked with?
Oh, that would be 6.
6, okay, great. So maybe it's not just delivery accuracy, it's seeing the delivery date, the speed, the shipping options. Maybe it's more about
Okay.
delivery options. Good. Okay, so the other ones that we want to edit. So at this point, inviting everybody to divide and conquer. We got something like a couple minutes left. So maybe 2 of us can start summarizing objectives and a couple of us can start looking at risks. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Let me see. I'll help you out with the risk side
Okay.
because we already have Kim and wait. Is it Hamid that's doing PI or are you doing risk? Okay, I'll be helping Rafi with risk then.
Okay. So are you okay with the kind of these risks that we have already?
Yeah, because it's already
Because we did have a team member absent
we
unexpectedly.
did. Yeah, that's true. Um
Shipping delayed due to weathers, or shipping delays due to weather. Is that something that we should put as a risk, or is that
I'm
outside of the scope
thinking
of this, you think?
I think that would be more outside the scope. What I'm thinking now is like not so much the delivery, but now
Development.
yeah, because the one that I'm thinking of, and I want to be sure I'm thinking this right. Say you're wanting to buy 3 items. 2 of the items are in stock, but one of them is out of stock. Do we make it to where we can provide partial fulfillment, or it's you can only be able to buy these 2, but the third one is right?
Should we put scope creep?
Okay.
We're over on time, by the way. She hasn't entered the room, but yeah, we are over on time.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Um, Right now, mine is trying to remember all this terminology. So I've been trying to do Jira boards and just trying to understand that. My God. Let's see.
What about for the risk items saved for later purchase become unavailable? Yeah, I suppose not. Okay.
Uh, I was thinking of that as well. The one for me though is wouldn't that have to be something where
Well, should we look at the SWOT analysis to determine what the weaknesses and threats are? To then that could play into the risks.
So I would think that something like that would be determined by someone outside of our development scope, like some sort of business person that's determining the prices. I think that our application would just need to be able to adjust if that is the case.
the other
I
one?
don't- I don't
Oh,
know
go
if
ahead.
it's something I don't know if it's something for us to consider that much, as long as our price can adjust to that.
The other one too, from just the demonstration, is we're wanting to provide the easiest and fastest like shopping cart experience. So would those difficulties also include that we can only be able to handle a certain amount of payment methods regarding for what can or can't be purchased? So like say for example, easiest one, some people just don't use Discover. So you have to use Visa, Amex, MasterCard, or that would be a risk to me at least. Wouldn't that be more of a bank issue? Because then that would be based off of the issuing bank with the number and information. I'm just mainly thinking of it would just be what's the most convenient and fastest way. Because I like certain sites that are able to process PayPal. I like it where they actually can accept Discover. So the variety of payment methods, maybe. Oh, okay.
Because if you want to add more payment option, that's like more of an enhancement.
What about another risk? Because you said one of the goals was to go international, right? Is to be able to factor in additional languages other than English. So not being able to get that done.
I think that would be more for the changes to the shipping charges, because then if we're including like international customs and that information, that would be associated with that risk as well for the changes to shipping charges.
The language part?
No, not the language, the charge or charges by carrier without notice. Because the way that I'm thinking of it is like after the shopping cart has been processed, then it's being sent off for delivery. But for language, wouldn't that be
Hey team, sorry, just understanding the concern here. What are we talking about?
we're trying to think of more risks regarding for shopping cart checkout because we're trying to make it to where from the example the easiest, the fastest, and the most convenient.
Okay, sounds good. Now, a good idea for identifying risks, maybe the first thing we want to do is look at the objectives that we have come up with and highlight anything we don't want to guarantee. So is there any that we feel uncomfortable with? Do we want to uncommit to anything? And this would be a question for our team members, Rafi and Hamid.
Okay.
Delivery. I would,
Which
Yeah,
if
and
I
I'd
had to
say
pick
shipping
one thing,
preferences is
number 6?
saving shipping preferences isn't like necessarily a priority.
Okay, so remember, uncommitted is not about priority. Uncommitted is about what do we have less confidence in delivering.
delivery time, delivery accuracy.
Okay, so delivery accuracy, so we can flag that as uncommitted. Is there anything else we have less confidence in delivering?
I feel like all the other objectives are pretty much straightforward. It would just be the two largest difficulties would be upgrading Eclipse and then making sure that we can resolve both the technical spikes for the Ajax capabilities and then the shipping costs using UPS and FedEx web services.
All right, so I'm hearing maybe upgrading Eclipse. Is this something we feel confident in delivering?
That would sound like it would have to be priority number one.
Yeah, so
Yes,
it
I
could be
think that we'd be
priority
confident
one.
on.
But remember, this has nothing to do with your priority. It's nothing to do with your estimate. It's everything to do with how confident you feel in delivering this objective. So are we okay with just that one?
Ultimately, if something has more moving pieces or more unknowns, that will be least confident, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So is there anything else you want to flag as uncommitted?
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah. So I think delivery accuracy, but then Dean or anyone else in the team, if you want to call out something else.
I would say save items for later.
Yeah.
That could be something where it's not imperative towards the business idea, just because saving an item wouldn't really affect much for the shopping cart or even for uh, the shipping quotes. So mainly that would be something that we can put in uncommitted as well.
Hearing is that it may be a lower priority, but it is doable. Remember, uncommitted is everything that we are doing in this PI is a higher priority for this PI. Right? That's
I would
why
say anything that has to deal with search because that's dependent on the other team.
okay. So is there anything that's to do with search here?
You can see the price for
Maybe your
shipping.
shopping cart might be dependent on the customer able to search and then add it to your shopping cart. Right? But now the question you want to ask, do you feel confident that the other team will deliver it on time so you can get your feature moving along? Right? So that would be something you want to talk about. Now, Hamid was on the right track. Anything that has more moving pieces, potentially, which might have some unknowns. For example, estimating shipping costs in your cart, right? That is tied in with determining how to calculate those shipping costs, right? That can potentially have a lot of uncertainty, unknowns. We need to collaborate with UPS, FedEx, look at their APIs, gather that information from them. You see that?
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
anything that has a lot of moving pieces, a lot of unknowns, those are the ones you want to flag as uncommitted. Does that make sense? Dean, does that help?
Sorry, I'm just still trying to just like be sure that I'm understanding this correctly.
Right? Okay, let's go back to that example. So Dean, yesterday you mentioned you want a coffee run over the weekend, you want to hit the beach, you want to watch a movie, go for dinner, study, right? You have the capacity for all 5 things. All 5 of these things are important. That's why you have prioritized them in the next weekend. But hitting the beach is dependent on weather conditions, something that's outside of your control. There's lots of unknowns. So you flag it as uncommitted. You don't guarantee it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the my process of thinking of it is that wouldn't all of those be influenced by outside decisions as well regarding for anything else? So for just particularly like not the beach example, but like say the coffee shop, say the coffee shop is closed because of unknown reasons or the building burned down or
Yeah.
that
But there's
that
going to be some level of confidence, right? You might have more confidence in hitting the coffee shop, but less confidence in hitting the beach, right? Anything that you're less confident in should be the ones that are flagged as uncommitted. Now, as a Scrum Master, as a coach, we encourage to flag at least 10-15% as uncommitted objectives.
So delivery accuracy and estimate shipping costs.
Sure. So if the team is comfortable with these two, comfortable with the other objectives, are we feeling confident in delivering those other objectives?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
That's it. But another thing you want to make sure, if you're flagging something as uncommitted, it should have one or more risks associated with it so you can justify why we are calling it uncommitted. For example, for shipping costs, one of the risks is your changes in shipping charges. Okay, so maybe that API doesn't grab that latest information. Maybe another risk could be we need access to those shipping APIs. Right? So we need access to UPS and FedEx APIs. That could be a risk. What if we don't get that access on time? Right? What could be a risk with that delivery accuracy? Is there something we can think of?
Whether even like UPS and FedEx having staffing issues, which could then affect the ability to deliver within a given window.
Okay.
I have seen an Amazon 18-wheeler upside down on a highway personally on a snow day. So that could happen too.
Okay.
Chain.
So shipping days as they are done by external vendors. They're done by UPS and FedEx. So that is a risk. Is that fair?
Yeah, disaster.
Yes.
Okay, great, good. I think we have a decent plan. Are we good to close the rooms?
So
Okay, all right, so let's close the rooms. I'll see everybody back in the main room. All right, all right. Welcome back. How was that exercise?
Intense. I like it.
Good. Brains working.
Painful. Now, this is what will happen in the first PI planning for sure. Right? You're all running around. You don't quite know what's going on. Your scrum masters are catching up. Your product owners leading you in the wrong direction. There's too many things going on. But as you go through more and more PI planning, it's going to get more and more streamlined. Right? Now, one thing to do is if we have dedicated scrum masters in each team that can help keep everybody on track, that can help keep things moving, that will definitely help. But if we have part-time scrum masters, people who are playing multiple roles, who's a developer and who's a scrum master, or who's a scrum master for multiple teams, they may not be available enough to ensure everybody keeps moving forward. Everybody see that?
Yes, that has definitely been a problem.
Recommended practice is that we have a dedicated scrum master, especially when the team is new, especially when the team is not familiar with PI planning, not familiar with the process. Now, one of the things that hasn't been highlighted yet, in the middle of these team breakouts, we're going to have something called a coach sync meeting as well. And we could schedule it every half an hour, every 1 hour, but it depends on each organization. And I've seen a multiple or a combination approach. For example, each team is going to have a set of these questions, and you can add or subtract questions, and you could be turning them green, red, or yellow. So green would be it's complete, red would be it's blocked, yellow could be it's in progress. Okay, so maybe let's go through these questions, and with a show of hands, who are the scrum masters again?
Oh, no, the scrum master.
Kim and Michael, questions for you. Have you identified the capacity of each iteration in the PI? Yay, nay? Yes, good. Have you identified stories and begun estimating? Yay or nay? Yes, good. Are you resolving dependencies with other teams yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Next one, are you discussing trade-offs with business owners yet? No, not yet. Next one, have you identified any PI risks? Any risks?
Yes.
Yes. Next, are you ready to start writing objectives? And I think both the teams are now done. Now, the last one, do you need to discuss anything with other coaches? Now, this is the time to have those discussions. So Kim might say, hey, Michael, we have a dependency on your team. Our shopping cart is dependent on your search functionality. Is there an opportunity for us to come and collaborate with your team? And Michael might say, hey, we are still figuring out our stories. How about you give us another 30 minutes? Let's connect then. Okay, another conversation that might take place, Michael might say, hey, Kim, we have a functionality on our team to do wildcard searches or fuzzy search. We have not done this in the past. The team doesn't feel confident on it, and we don't know what tools to use. But we remember somebody on your team has done something like this in the past. So is it possible to bring over Rafi so we can understand a little bit more from him, the tools we want to use, what kind of effort this will involve? And Kim might say, hey, let me go connect with Rafi. I'll get back to you. Right? So those are the types of discussions you want to have during this time. Now, there's multiple ways we can facilitate this code sync. Number one, each team has their own set of questionnaire and you're turning them green, red, amber. And it's my responsibility as a release train engineer to ensure all the teams are progressing well. If I notice one or more teams that are lagging behind, so it's been, let's say, 3 hours of your team breakout, it's been a couple of hours and we are still figuring out our stories, maybe we are running a little bit behind, right? So this is an opportunity for me to send over product management, send over system architects to provide that clarity, to help the teams progress. Because it's my responsibility to ensure this PI planning is effective. We have, and all the teams are ready with some plans to present. Make sense? Yep. Okay.
And this coach sync happens as one of the items in the PI 2-day planning.
Exactly. So during your team breakout, all of your coaches, that means release train engineer and your Scrum Masters team coach, will head over to a different room and they'll touch base and then see where everybody's at. Does anybody need any help? Do we need to collaborate with somebody? Okay, so those are things that will take place, and you can schedule it every hour, but you could also have these boards where you're turning them green, red, yellow, so we know where everybody's at. Cool.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Now the next thing that will happen, each team is gonna present their plan. So we'll simply, representatives from each team will come to the front of the room. They'll talk about their loads. They will talk about their objectives. They'll talk about any uncommitted objectives along with any risks we've highlighted. Okay, so in this case, team Fateh has loaded 29, with capacity is 32. We have 7 objectives, 2 of which are uncommitted, and we have highlighted some risks. Now looking at team Safest, we are loading 25 and 24 points. We've got 7 objectives, 2 of which are uncommitted. We've highlighted a few risks as well. Okay, now in the draft plan review, this is an opportunity to ask questions, provide clarifications. For example, we might say, customer demo is in 5 weeks, only 2 iterations to present something. Yes, that's true, but we're going to be okay with presenting whatever gets done. Okay, so we can provide some clarification here. We can ask questions, hey, for this integration of internationalization, did you consider this factor? Did you consider this? You can highlight some additional dependencies as well. With me? Yeah, okay, good. Now, the next thing that happens at the end of day 1, we go into that management review. Okay, so all of your leadership roles, your business owners, your system architect, product management, RTE, also recommended that product owners and Scrum Masters stay back. I'm going to talk about what did we learn? Do we need to make adjustments to our vision, our scope, our team assignments? Are there any bottlenecks? Do we need to de-scope anything? And what decisions do we make between now and tomorrow to address these concerns? Any changes made at the end of day 1 will be shared the first thing on day 2. And here are some potential changes that can be made. You could get a question on this. Anywhere you see a bullet point list like this can make an easy exam question. Okay, so perhaps your priorities change. Perhaps your vision, now this is hinting towards your art level vision. This is hinting towards your vision, your roadmap, your timelines can potentially, your milestones can change. Your scope can be redefined. Maybe other teams have capacity to take on a higher priority feature. So they take some of that work on. Okay, Prerna, question?
Yeah, sorry. This is when we were discussing, there was a question that popped up. So I wasn't clear and I wanted to get clarity is when we discussed that the uncommitted work, it is a part of the load.
Yes.
But it's okay if you don't basically result in it, but it's actually taken into the load category, right?
Yes, this is planned work
Okay,
right?
which is
All of these features that were brought into this PI
okay.
have been prioritized by leadership roles.
Okay,
Everything is higher in priority for this PI.
so it's a part of the load, and
Is
yeah.
planned. You've included them in your capacity. You've loaded them into your PI, but because of some unknowns, some uncertainty, something that you're not comfortable with, you don't have much confidence in, those are the ones you're flagging as not guaranteed, uncommitted.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, good. Now, the next thing that will happen, we're going to go into our second breakout on day 2, and you will finalize your plans, taking into account those adjustments. Now, this one is a little bit special. We fill out this BV column. Okay, BV stands for business value. Who do you think is going to assign the business value?
The business owners.
So our business owner Hamid is going to be stepping around from room to room and assigning business values from 1 to 10. Now, why are we assigning business values to each of these objectives? It helps with 2 things. Number 1, Hamid is going to have a look at what each team is doing, and he's going to be able to say, yes, the teams get it. They're on the right track. They understood what the vision is. And Hamid is going to be able to present his point of view. Which of these objectives do we think will add the most value to the business? Right? So Hamid is happy. On our side, on the team side, the team is happy because now they're getting some face time, some time with leadership roles. They are able to understand which of these objectives are more valuable. So when it comes to prioritizing those stories, they can make those decisions at the team level. They can make those decisions. For example, if we say, hey, this one is a 10 valued objective, perhaps we should prioritize these stories first. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So teams get that additional information so that they can prioritize effectively. Good? Good. Okay, so let's see some of this in action. Hamid, I'm going to take you to one of the teams. And since you are in team Fateh, let's take you to team safest. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Now, the first objective is a simple search by author, title, genre. How critical, how valuable is this? 1 to 10, 10 being the highest for the business. 10. All right, great. Next one, giving suggestions as we type in. So 1 to 10. Okay, great. Supporting API. So API gives us our match results. That's a 10. Great. The ability to enter shipping info. 8. Okay. Recommending books based on previous search. 5. Oops. 5. Searching books by author, even if there are misspellings. 5. Okay, let's go with the first one. Impact of internationalization for that epic coming up in the next PI. 5 as well. Okay, great. Now, here's what will happen. Now, there's an opportunity. There's a potential example. For example, let's say this is a 10 valued objective. Okay. Now, this is where that negotiation is going to come in. Remember one of these sentences, discussing trade-offs and conflicting priorities, right? So Hamid is going to say, hey, this objective is super critical for us. Is there any way that you can commit to it? Is there any information you need from us? Right? And it's possible that business owners, product management can provide some clarity. But at the end of the day, the decision to flag it as committed or uncommitted lies with the team. Okay. And you could be discussing some other conflicts as well. Let me show us a scenario for that. Okay. So let's assume that in the second breakout room, the business owner is coming over to your team and the team is taking on several tech related stories to reduce tech debt, to automate their infrastructure. Now, since the business owner is from the business side of things, they end up ranking everything 4 or lower and the team is getting upset. What can the Scrum Master do in this case? Exactly, right? Negotiate with the business owner, help them understand the importance of these technical objectives. Now, what can the Scrum Master do to help avoid this problem before it happens?
Establish the capacity allocation with the team.
All right, so also talk about capacity allocation. Hey, we decided because we are taking a lot of technical stories for this PI, our capacity for enabler work is going to be a little bit higher. That's why we have a lot of these technical enablers. What else can we do?
Understand from business what is the expectation out of current iteration. Though we have the story and everything, walk it through so that business owner is able to flag it if something is conflicting.
Yeah. Now, another thing you want to potentially do, if you notice you're working on a lot of technical items. Now, who's a tech lead in our leadership roles?
Architect.
It's going to be the system architect. So if you know that you have some tech objectives and a lot of tech objectives, maybe be a little bit proactive, call me over, call the system architect over. So she can help the business owners understand why these are important. Why automation is important, why tech debt is important, reducing it is important. Make sense? Yep. Okay, good. So this is all about our first output of PI planning, which is the PI objectives. Does anybody remember the second output of PI planning?
The
PI.
board.
Called the planning board. And it looks something like this. You will notice in your columns are your iterations, including the 5th iteration, and there's nothing below it. So that's not planned work. You don't plan work for it. In your roles, you will notice your teams. If you're inviting any shared services, intermediaries, you will see those listed out as well. There are 3 main components on this planning board. In blue, you will see features. And you place stickies for features when you are done with that feature, when you plan to deliver that feature. So this feature will be delivered by Lions in the middle of the 1st iteration. Okay, this feature will be delivered by Antelope towards the end of the 2nd iteration. Everybody see that? Now, question here, if Antelopes doesn't have anything in the 1st iteration, what is it that they're doing?
Still working on the previous backlog. Therefore, they're.
What do we mean by previous backlog?
I mean the stories from the previous iteration, because they're committing to submitting it in iteration 2.
Okay.
Still working on.
Now, what did we say about the size of a feature? A feature needs to fit one
iteration.
One iteration.
One PI.
One PI.
Oh, yeah, one PI.
Stories fit iterations, features fit PI. So features may not be doable each iteration. So this feature is taking almost 2 iterations. See that?
Mm-hmm.
The team is doing their own work. They're not sitting idle. They're not waiting around. They're not sitting, just wasting time. They're doing their own work. With me? Yeah, so we don't show those stories, right? If we start showing stories on this planning board, you'll have 50 stickies in each team area become very readable. We place stickies for features. When is this feature going to be delivered? Now, the second component on this planning board is something called the red stickies, dependencies. So if a feature, for example, this feature from Unicorn is dependent on something from Lions, and these are generally stories. This story from Lions is dependent on additional stories from Bears, Tigers, UX. Does that make sense? Right, so dependencies always flow right. This is a dependency for that one. This is a dependency for that. Make sense?
I think my one question is, are the red stickies also a feature?
These are generally stories.
Okay, thank you.
Right, generally stories. Now you will notice we are only showing inter-team dependencies. If we have dependencies within the same team, we assume a team is capable enough to sequence their stories in that manner. The only reason we formed this release train is so that we can help our teams better manage their dependencies between these teams. Make sense? Right? So we only show inter-team dependencies. Now in orange, the 3rd component here, this is going to be your milestones investor demo coming up in 5 weeks. That's probably it. For this demo, we need this feature. For this feature, we need the story from another team. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. Another question here. Who do you think is adding stickies in Team Unicorn's role?
The program, the program product manager.
Only Team Unicorn can add stickies in their own row. Now, if Team Unicorn has a dependency on Lions, can they add a sticky in Lions row? No, right? They will need to collaborate with Lions, get them to realize, yes, there's a dependency. They will place this red sticky. You simply connect with a thread. Make sense?
So the person of contact is the PO, or it's...
So Scrum Masters can potentially represent this, but the full team can add stickies in their own row.
Okay.
Right? Essentially, everybody should contribute. If you leave it up to just one person, 3 hours may not be enough to even update your program, your planning board. Okay. Now, through this planning board, you can identify some concerns. For example, we notice this milestone is in iteration 3, and this feature is also being delivered in iteration 3. Any delay in these dependencies can cause a delay in this feature. Any delay in this feature can cause us to miss that milestone. See that? Right? So perhaps this is a conversation we want to have. Should we split this feature into 2? Have another team be responsible for a part of this feature? Or should we remove some things in scope so that it's doable at least one iteration before? Make sense?
The original thing that you said was that Team Unicorn has 3 features. That was the original thing that you said, the issue.
No, so I'm saying the issue is that this milestone, which is in iteration 3, needs this feature, which is also being delivered in iteration 3. What if it gets delayed? We might miss that milestone.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? So perhaps you want to de-scope some items, perhaps you want to split this feature into 2, have another team be responsible for a part of this. See that? Right? Another thing you might see, this feature is dependent on these 2 stories from lions, from tigers. Any delay in those dependencies can cause a delay in this feature. So Team Unicorn can flag it as a risk. We have a dependency on 2 additional teams. Any delay in those stories can cause a delay in our feature. Another thing you could do, you could approach lions and tigers, ask them to prioritize, and we say, hey, tigers, is it possible to get this delivered a little bit sooner? Tigers might say, hey, we have room for this. We can reprioritize. Yes, we can do it. But lions might say, hey, no, we've got some of our own dependencies. We are doing our own work that is super critical. There's no way we can reprioritize this. So maybe the Scrum Master of Team Unicorn will also want to attend the team sync events of Lions in this iteration 4. As soon as a blocker is identified, Team Unicorn should be made aware of it right away. Make sense?
No, you're saying so many different ideas.
Okay.
I'm still back at the second one, but keep going. You're talking so fast. I can't write and keep up with what you're saying.
Okay, all right. I'm not expecting you to write everything I say. I'm expecting you to understand everything I say. Okay, Sonia. All right.
Okay.
Sonia. So with this planning board, we are essentially hoping to identify any risks that can derail our plans, hoping to identify any concerns from this planning board. That's the main idea. Does that make sense, Sonia?
Okay, yes.
Yep. Okay, good. Questions about that planning board?
One question for the for the last feature that we were talking about. I noticed it has some dependencies on the UX hub. Is that why they are associated in a similar manner? Because the help is going to come somewhere mid-iteration, so that's why it is dependent. So even if Unicorn wants to deliver that feature, they need to collaborate not just with the team, they need to even look at the fact that it is dependent on the other teams.
Yeah.
Could that,
Yeah,
is that any driving factor? Sorry.
Teams that you have direct dependency on, for example, in this case, you're dependent on lions, you're dependent on tigers. So Unicorn will probably be collaborating with lions and tigers only. If tigers has an additional dependency on the system architect, they will be the ones collaborating with the system architect. Okay, generally,
Just thinking, shouldn't Unicorn keep in touch with them as well, because their feature is somehow still going to use that functionality or something. Yeah,
it's a good idea to be aware of it, but because they're not directly dependent on system architect, that might be a waste of time for them. Okay, all right, good.
Mina, you just said that because the dependency, because Lions have the because the UX has the dependency on Lions, it's up to UX to get with them. Is that what you said?
So dependencies flow, right? So UX is a dependency for Lions. So Lions should collaborate with UX.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is what happens in the second half of day 2. Now, question here, we're probably left with about 5, maybe 10-ish minutes of PI planning. Do we want to spend 10 minutes, wrap it up, and then go for our break? Okay with that? Yeah, okay, great. So the next thing that will happen, we'll review the final plans. Where did I go? Okay, reviewing everybody's final plans. So again, each team will come to the front of the room, present their plans, opportunity to ask questions, provide additional clarity. And key thing to note here, you could get a question on this. Business owners have the final say. So Hamid has a lot of power. He can give his final yes or no to everybody's plans. Okay, another thing that happens is we are going to address our risks. Remember the risks everybody came up with? Right now we're going to roam those risks. Now any team level risks can be roamed in each team area, but any release train level risks will be discussed collectively. Okay, what does roam stand for? Stands for resolved. That means it has been addressed. It won't be a concern anymore. Okay, so as of this PI planning meeting, no longer a concern. Owned generally means somebody else, somebody outside of the team has taken responsibility. If the team itself is taking responsibility, that's generally just accepted by the team. And M stands for mitigation. Caveat here, this is not the English word mitigate. In English, mitigation means reducing risk. Here, mitigation means we have a plan B. We have a contingency option to make adjustments as needed. Now let's take an easy example. So going back to, I think Sonia was driving from Boston to Atlanta. Is that right? Wait, hold on.
From Atlanta to Boston.
Atlanta. Okay, so Sonia was driving from Atlanta to DC. I think she was going to Michael.
DC.
Right, going to DC. Now, what if Sonia is concerned with getting a flat tire? What can we do with that risk?
Have another tire, or maybe search for certain routes where there is an option for service centers.
Okay, so one thing I heard is having a spare tire. So she has a, if she gets a flat, she can make an adjustment. I hear run flat tires, you can continue driving even if you get a flat. That would be a resolution, so it won't be or fly instead. Yeah, that's also a resolution strategy. What else could Sonia do?
Get roadside assistance.
Roadside assistance like AAA or CAA. So somebody else has taken responsibility to come and bail her out. Right? Accepted would be she simply drives off and she risks getting a flat. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see this in our Miro board. So let's see some examples for this. And for this one, I'm going to take you to team success, team Fateh. Let's say one of the risks is we can't guarantee shipping dates as they're being delivered by external vendors. What can we do with that?
It's owned by somebody else.
Yeah, get another, get multiple shipper options.
Okay, so we are investigating 2 vendors. We've got UPS and we've got FedEx because they are the ones who are going to be delivering these books. We can't guarantee those dates. So what can we do?
Just the timeline accounting for that delay. Worst case scenario.
Perhaps we want to give a range instead. Instead of saying 5 days, we say 5 to 7 days, something like that. Right? So in that case, maybe we are okay with this. In that case, it has been resolved. It's okay if we don't guarantee it, but we are okay. We have talked to our stakeholders and they're comfortable being controlled. Sometimes there's nothing we can do about it because it's outside of our control. In that case, you might have to accept it. Now, if you have those vendors being represented in this PI planning, if you have UPS and FedEx available during this PI planning, in that case, you can approach them, you can talk to them, and they might end up owning it. Right? So in this case, we are assuming they're not here, so we might simply accept it. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Let's say another concern is we won't have access to UPS and FedEx API. What can we do with that concern? Local shipping. So this is about accessing the API so we can extract those shipping costs and present those costs on our website on Geekbooks. So maybe we can investigate some other vendors outside of UPS and API, right? In that case, that's going to be a mitigation strategy. Everybody see that? Right? If we don't get access to them, we're going to go with another vendor. What is another thing we could do with this?
Could take their periodic rate changes. So let's say for this week, what is the rate that they have? Talk to them and manually add that information and feed it into the system.
Manually adding that information instead. So instead, if we don't have access to those APIs, maybe what we are going to do instead is we are going to extract this info manually, maybe using CSVs or something like that. We update it every day instead of in real time. Okay, so that could be a mitigation strategy. Another thing we can do with this risk is if somebody is responsible for giving us that access, let's say the system architect is managing vendor relationships. In that case, we'll approach them and we will ensure the system architect can ensure we have that access by the time we have to implement this functionality. So it's been owned by the system architect. Make sense? Yep. Okay. Okay, maybe let's look at this one. Changes to the shipping charges by carriers without notice. What can we do in this case?
Are sort of connected with the same mitigation we did. Access to the UPI or for the rates.
So maybe what we're going to do is once we have access to that API, we can ensure that instead of extracting data every day, we are extracting data every 5 minutes so that we can be aware of any of those updates. So in that case, it will be resolved. It won't be a concern. We're going to extract info every 5 minutes. Okay, so maybe in that case, the business can decide, hey, we're going to consume those extra costs. Once a customer is paid this, they've paid for it. Right, so there's multiple things to do here. Now, do you see how the same thing can be dropped into different buckets depending on what you're doing with it? Right, resolved means as of this PI planning meeting, no longer a concern. Owned means somebody else outside of the team has taken ownership. Accepted means there's nothing you want to do about it. You're just owning it by the team. It can derail your plan. Mitigation would mean you have a plan B to make adjustments. Adam, question, comment?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how it could be resolved if we haven't resolved the API yet. So how can it?
Resolved means as of this PI planning meeting, it won't be a concern. So for example, if we decided we're going to extract and refresh this API every 5 minutes, then this won't be a concern. We will be aware of these carrier changes.
But we will keep tracking it because in case we don't get it, it's still a risk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, for example, another risk could have been let's say this one here, new team with limited experience in collaborating, or let's say limited experience with the tools. Okay, so the tools that we want to use, they have limited experience. What can we do in this case? Perhaps we're going to allocate some capacity for enablers. So we're going to provide them training, or they're going to research how to use these tools before they start working on those functionality. Does that make sense? Right. So in that case, we have created those enabler stories. We have prioritized them. So as of this PI planning meeting, it has been resolved. It won't be a concern. They will be equipped with that information by the time they have to implement that functionality.
Sorry if I'm taking it too far, but how do we know that that train actually will help? isn't it good to keep it tracking it to make sure that we might need additional training for particular persons? So
Yeah.
would you actually place it as resolved, or I'm just maybe
Still
stuck? Yeah.
resolved, because as of this PI planning meeting, the information we have as of this PI planning meeting, it has been resolved. Now,
Okay.
there is still uncertainty that training is not sufficient, and that's going to be accounted for in your estimates of those stories. Remember, there's an uncertainty factor, right? So those
Okay.
stories will be estimated higher if there's a lot of uncertainty.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, now the next thing that will happen is that we go into a confidence vote, and you're showcasing confidence or commitment to two things. You will do everything in your power to deliver on those objectives, and you're showcasing commitment to escalating immediately if there's anything that derails your plan. Okay, so you're committing to these two things. You do it in a fist of five. So we are simply raising our fingers, showcasing how confident we feel about our plans. It's a good idea to do a team level confidence vote first. And if you're noticing a lot of ones and twos, maybe that team should continue planning, continue staying back, continue talking through things. Okay, good idea to do a release train level vote. Everybody in this PI planning meeting gets one vote each. And as a release train engineer, I'm looking for threes and higher, and I want to address the concerns of any ones and twos. At this point in time, we've spent 2 days in PI planning. So hopefully we are feeling pretty confident about our plans. Anything that we are less confident in should have been flagged as uncommitted, should have been flagged as additional buffer space in your load. So instead of 10%, 30% buffer space should have been flagged as additional estimates in your story sizing. Make sense?
You say anything that are ones and twos should have been flagged and should have been uncommitted?
I'm saying that if the team has any concern at this point, we have spent 2 days in PI planning. So there's lots of places where you can flag that uncertainty. So you should be feeling fairly confident, but you do want to address the concerns of any ones and twos.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Michael, question. Thanks for raising your hand.
Oh yeah, no worries. I was curious about the team versus the art vote. Would you say the team vote on level of confidence in the plan is something that happens basically privately, or is it in front of the whole art?
So team vote would take place at the end of your team breakout. And art vote will take place collectively in front of everybody else in this PI planning meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Now, at the end of this PI planning, we have a retrospective similar to our retro from yesterday. What's going well? What can we improve on? What can we do better the next time? Now, at the end, this is a takeaway for your release train engineer. Okay, your RTE is going to take all of those team level PI objectives. Okay, team level PI objectives and roll them up into release train level objectives. Okay, so this is a takeaway for your RTE. Good. Good. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our discussion on PI planning. Now, with a fist of five, just a quick check-in. How confident do we feel about our understanding of PI planning? At the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right, I'm seeing 3s, I'm seeing 4s, I'm seeing 5s. I'm not seeing any 1s and 2s, so I am good. That's exactly how this is done in real life as well. Fair? Yep, okay, great. All right, due for our midday break. Again, are we okay with something like yesterday, 43-minute lunch break or 43-minute dinner break? So being back at, okay, Adam's saying a 4 on that. So being back at 2 p.m. EST, fair? Cool. All right, I'll see you back at 2.